YouTube. Today we got 2006 Hyundai Sonata valve covers. So the upper intake has to come off for that rear valve cover. If you're going to do one, you might as well do both. So for starters, you're going to want to get some stuff cleaned up. That way you can identify connectors and sensors. The wiring and disconnecting and making space is the biggest part of this job. Once you get to the valve covers, that part of the job will go by pretty smooth as long as all your bolts come out nice and easy. But mainly knowing where these connectors go and putting them back in the right spot is going to be what you want to focus on. So what I have, I'm marking each one, kind of putting different marks so I know what's what. You're going to need a 10 millimeter and an 8 millimeter. 8 millimeter for the radiator hose, little entertainment. 10 millimeter for everything on the engine. Almost every bolt on the engine's a 10 millimeter. So we're just going to disconnect this hose right here at the top. We have a pan at the bottom that's going to catch the little bit that'll drip out here, but we'll just set it right on top. That'll stop it from leaking. You'll lose minimal fluids from the motor, and then you can move on from this point. So we'll disconnect that hose, get that out of the way. We popped off the air cleaner. It's just going to be 4 clips. Now this one, there's a little safety tab. Once you move it down, just squeeze in and slide that thing off. You can kind of wiggle it side to side. It'll make it a little easier. Now this breather hose right here, you can get this slid off. I like taking it off from the intake side. That way the hose will stay with the air cleaner, and we'll just move that one piece all the way out to the side and make it a little bit easier. Clean space up, put a bag over the rest of that area just so we don't get debris in there. So right here we're going to disconnect the connectors that are going from the harness to the upper intake. And at this point, all we really need to do is follow the harness for all the mounting bolts. So we're going to start there and disconnect every bolt that actually holds the harness onto the motor. So we're going to go through, do all of that. Once you get that done, you'll see you'll have that harness piece up there loose. But I do want to show you how to disconnect some of these connectors, because the next thing you will be doing is disconnecting the fuel injectors and the ignition coils. So right here, here's one connector. You just squeeze the little tab on the top, slide it backwards. This one, there's a locking tab on it. So these little picks I like to use, you can almost use them on every single connector. That'll slide the safety tab forwards, and now I'm just squeezing it, just pinching it together, shaking it to the side, sliding it backwards. That'll disconnect it nice and easy. Do that on all of them. Now right here, I have a hose that's a little stubborn, so with the pick in, I just slide it in the back, kind of roll it around a little bit, then use these pliers to just slide it forwards. Voila, nice and easy. Get that out of the way. Next up, again, I'm just following the whole harness around. Disconnected each thing on there and then followed the harness to each connector. So as you go and disconnect each mounting bolt, you'll see each connector as you go. Just take them off, and you'll see you can move the whole harness right out of your way. That's going to expose the upper intake, where you can start getting those bolts out and getting the rest of the job done. So in the back, you'll see 2 more back there, all 10 millimeters. You have a 13 on that side though, and then this hose, I left it on there again because I'm going to pick it up in one piece. You have 3 bolts on your throttle body, and once you get those off, you can lift the whole intake out. So you'll go around it, all those 10 millimeters, disconnect the throttle body and the hose, and that thing's gone. So at this point, we have valve covers. We are going to want to clean some stuff up, get the ignition coils out of there, vacuum it up, and that way you can just get everything put back together nice and clean. So from here, I already got one off. Right here, these bolts, I'm going to show you right down dead center and then around the outside perimeter. You're going to want to hit all those bolts, get those popped off. Once you get those off, you'll be able to lift that valve cover right off of the top. So we'll go through here. Again, when you put it back together, you're going to want to worry about the star pattern, inside out, left and right. That way you don't put it on uneven. That little wedge tool came in handy. Sometimes these things stick down. You don't want to put metal in your aluminum and scratch it up. So little plastic wedge tool will work. And onto the fun stuff, popping in the gasket. So just make sure it's nice and cleaned up in that area where you're going to wedge that gasket in. And I like to start where the bolts are. You'll see the little holes where those shapes are in the front, and I use those to just set them in right where they're folded, the way they want to fold in the hole. That way all the corners line up and it's not stretched out. Put it back in and make sure it doesn't pinch in between the sides. You don't want that gasket to fall out while you're putting the valve cover back in. Start torquing stuff down and see that you've pinched something on the side. Have to start over, get a new gasket. If the damage is too bad, you just got to get a new gasket. So always be careful when you're putting everything in. Make sure it's sealed up, tucked in nice and tight. But once you get the gasket in, that's the job. So make sure everything you're doing at this point is set perfect. Everything lines up. You don't have anything uneven. Everything's tucked in. Then pop everything back on, get them cleaned up, and you can move on to the upper intake, which again starts off with more cleaning because you don't want to put it back together dusty and dirty. Pop these gaskets out. These ones are coming out pretty easy. Sometimes they can stick in there, rip in there. You do want to clean that out. You might have debris or oil depending on if you had any leaks up there. So a little bit of brake clean, whatever you want to use on there. Go through those edges, clean that out, get some air, spray that out. New gaskets, you'll see little tabs on the corner and there's spots to slide them in so they'll fit one way. Get them squeezed in, voila, move on. And there's also on each edge there's going to be 2 mounting bolts that you'll be able to put the upper intake right on. Once you do that, it'll be lined up where your throttle body's at. Get everything popped in and go through your sequence. So again, you're going to start inside out, up, down, left, right, and follow your pattern all the way out to the edges. Once you get that done, get them torqued down to spec. Get all your connectors set back up. Go through your harness. As you go through the harness, you're going to want to double check all your little points, everything you had on there. Take pictures from your initial pictures. Make sure you can see